All right. Let's dive into this population dynamics thing.
Okay.
You sent over some slides,
Yeah.
and we're going to break down what makes populations tick,
Right.
from like the basics
Okay.
to some really cool patterns.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So,
No, go ahead.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's kind of like looking under the hood of nature,
Yeah.
understanding how this numbers game plays out for different species.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll see how, like, births, deaths, even things like animals migrating
Hmm.
impact not just how many there are, but like how they live.
Right.
Ever wonder why fish group up, but penguins seem to need their personal space?
Yeah, that's a great example.
We'll get into that too.
Those patterns are so fascinating. It's nature's way of optimizing survival
Yeah.
based on the environment.
Okay, so let's start with like population change 101.
Okay.
What are the big players in this game?
Well, it's all about the balance between what adds to a population and what takes away from it.
So births and immigration bring in new individuals, while deaths and immigration reduce the numbers.
So it's like a constantly shifting equation.
Exactly.
More coming in than going out equals growth.
Yep.
What happens when a population just keeps growing, though? Can
Uh,
it go on forever?
that's where carrying capacity comes in.
Okay.
Imagine like a lush island paradise. It seems like it could support an endless number of, whatever's living there.
Right.
But there's a catch, limited resources.
Okay.
Food, water, shelter,
The essential.
even mates. All of these define the island's carrying capacity. So the maximum number of inhabitants it can sustain.
Right.
And if you exceed that, well,
Then what?
things get interesting.
Okay.
And not always in a good way.
So it's like an overcrowded party.
Yeah, like that.
At some point, you run out of snacks
Exactly.
and space to dance.
Yep, you got it.
But nature's a bit more intense than a party gone wrong, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
We've seen cases where populations just explode,
Yeah.
way exceeding their carrying capacity.
Give me an example.
Think of like deer overgrazing a forest.
Okay, yeah.
It can lead to resource depletion, starvation,
Oh, wow.
even damage to the environment itself.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that there are limits to growth.
For sure.
But speaking of overcrowding,
Yeah.
how does the density of a population
All right.
impact how they live and interact?
Density plays a huge role.
Okay.
Think of a bustling city like New York City.
Lots of people.
High density means intense competition for resources. And if a disease breaks out, it can spread like wildfire.
Right through the packed streets.
Exactly. It's a different ball game in a sparsely populated area,
Okay.
like a remote island,
Yeah.
where finding a mate or even essential resources might be the biggest challenge.
So density really shapes the survival game, whether you're elbow to elbow or miles apart.
Totally.
And it's not just about staying put, right?
Right.
Animals and humans are constantly on the move. What's the impact of all that coming and going?
You're talking about immigration and emigration.
Yeah.
Two powerful forces in population dynamics.
Right.
Immigration can bring fresh energy and diversity to a population, new skills and ideas, but it can also strain resources if not managed well.
Okay.
Emigration, on the other hand, can lead to what we call brain drain,
I've heard of that.
as skilled individuals leave, creating gaps in the workforce.
It's like a global dance
Is.
with people moving for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, definitely.
Seeking opportunities, escaping hardship, searching for a better life.
All of that.
Speaking of movement,
Yeah.
populations don't just grow in a straight line, do they?
Nope.
There are different growth patterns, right?
Exactly. Think of exponential growth, like a runaway train gaining speed.
Okay.
It's what we see with bacteria multiplying rapidly in a petri dish.
Right.
But that kind of unbridled growth can't go on forever.
Right.
Eventually, resources become limiting.
Yeah.
And we see a shift towards logistic growth, a more gradual climb that slows down as it approaches carrying capacity.
So exponential growth is a sprint.
Yeah,
Logistic growth is a marathon.
I like that analogy.
And just like a marathon, there are all sorts of obstacles and challenges along the way, right?
Definitely.
What are some of those factors that can really shake things up for a population?
Well, we can categorize these factors as density dependent
Oh,
or density independent.
density dependent. Okay.
As the name suggests, they pack a bigger punch the more crowded things get.
So the more crowded it is,
Yeah,
the more these factors come into play.
exactly.
Give us some examples.
Okay, so imagine a pack of wolves hunting elk.
Okay.
The denser the elk population,
Right.
the easier it is for the wolves to find and take down their prey.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Same goes for disease outbreaks.
Oh, yeah.
The closer individuals are, the faster a virus or bacteria can spread. Even something like waste accumulation can become a major problem in dense populations.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah.
High density triggers these factors,
Right.
which can then lead to a decrease in population density,
Exactly.
creating a kind of natural regulation.
Nature's way of balancing things out.
Okay, what about those density-independent factors?
Okay.
What makes them different?
These factors are the wild cards.
Okay.
The forces that can shake up a population regardless of how dense or spread out it is.
Give me an example.
Think natural disasters.
Okay.
A raging wildfire.
Oh, wow.
A devastating hurricane.
Yeah.
A sudden volcanic eruption.
Okay.
These events don't discriminate.
They can wipe out a large portion of population in one fell swoop.
Exactly.
So it's like a roll of the dice.
Yeah.
These density-independent factors,
Fully.
completely out of the population's control.
Right.
We've talked about how populations grow
Yeah.
and the factors that impact their size,
Mm-hmm.
but let's zoom in on how individuals within a population arrange themselves.
Okay.
It's more than just random scattering, isn't it?
We're right. There are some fascinating patterns to how individuals space themselves out within their habitat.
Interesting.
We call these dispersion patterns,
Okay.
and they offer clues about how species interact with each other in their environment.
Okay, so what are the different ways individuals can arrange themselves?
Right.
What's the most common pattern we see in nature?
One of the most common is clumped dispersion.
Okay.
Think of a school of fish darting through the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
or a herd of elephants lumbering across the savannah.
Right.
They group together for safety,
Okay.
increase foraging efficiency, and better mating opportunities.
Safety in numbers.
Exactly. It's a classic example of strength in numbers.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
There's power in unity, especially when facing predators
You're right.
or searching for scarce resources.
Absolutely.
What about those species that seem to prefer a bit more personal space?
That's where uniform dispersion comes in.
Okay.
Imagine a colony of penguins nesting on a rocky shore.
Okay. I can picture that.
Each pair needs its own little territory
Yeah.
to raise their chicks and defend their resources.
Makes sense.
This pattern is often driven by competition for limited resources or a need for territoriality.
So it's like each penguin family has its own little apartment
Yeah, like that.
with clearly defined boundaries.
Exactly.
And lastly, what about those species that seem to defy any sort of pattern?
We call that random dispersion.
Random. Okay.
Think of wildflowers scattered across a meadow.
Okay.
There's no real rhyme or reason to their distribution.
All right.
This pattern often occurs when resources are abundant,
Mm.
and there's no strong pressure for individuals to be close together or far apart.
So it's like they're just vibing, enjoying the abundance, and spreading out as they please. This is all so fascinating.
But it isn't it?
We've seen how these concepts play out in the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
But now let's shift our focus to ourselves,
Okay.
humans.
Right.
What makes our population dynamics unique?
Well, while we're subject to the same fundamental principles of births, deaths, and migration, humans have a unique ability to manipulate our environment
Right.
and influence these factors.
Yeah, in ways that no other species can.
Exactly.
It's like we're playing the game on a whole different level.
Yeah.
We've got technology, social structures,
Uh-huh.
and we're really good at adapting to different environments.
That's true.
So what are the main drivers behind this huge growth in human population?
Well, one of the biggest game changers has been advances in healthcare and sanitation.
Okay.
Over the last couple of centuries,
Mhm.
we've seen a dramatic decrease in death rates,
Especially among children, I imagine.
especially among children, yeah.
That makes sense. If fewer people are dying young, the population's bound to increase.
Exactly. And alongside that, we've gotten really good at producing and distributing food.
So we can feed more people than ever before.
Exactly. Which has also fueled population growth.
It's not just about people being born and living longer, though, is it?
Right.
There's also migration to consider.
You're right. Human migration patterns are super important. In shaping where populations are concentrated,
Okay.
people move for all sorts of reasons.
Like what?
Seeking better economic opportunities,
Okay.
fleeing conflict or persecution, or even escaping natural disasters.
Right.
All of these movements add to the constant shifts we see in global populations.
It's almost like a global puzzle,
It is
with pieces constantly shifting and rearranging.
a very dynamic puzzle.
But with all this growth, doesn't it put a strain on the planet's resources?
That's a critical point.
Yeah.
Resource availability is a huge concern when we talk about human population growth.
Okay.
We need to think about food security, access to clean water, energy consumption, and how we use land.
So it's like trying to fit more and more people into a house with finite space and resources.
Exactly.
We need to be smart about how we use what we've got.
We do.
It's not just about having enough, though, is it?
Right.
People need to be able to live a decent life.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's not just about quantity, it's about quality of life, too.
Right.
Everyone deserves access to the essentials. Clean water, nutritious food, a safe place to live.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really complex.
Okay.
Because social and economic factors come into play.
How do those things tie into the bigger picture of population dynamics?
Think about issues like poverty, access to education, healthcare, and gender equality.
Okay.
These all influence population growth and well-being. For example, in regions with high poverty rates, we often see higher birth rates.
Why is that?
Well, families may rely on children for support.
Oh, why
So it's like a chain reaction, one factor impacting another.
Right. I imagine cultural norms and beliefs also play a role.
Absolutely.
In some cultures, having a large family is seen as a blessing.
Right.
While others, smaller families are the norm.
Exactly. Those cultural attitudes can significantly shape population trends.
So we're talking about biology, ecology, economics, and culture,
It's all connected.
all coming together to influence how human populations grow and change.
Yeah, it's a pretty intricate web, isn't it?
It is. What are the potential consequences of all this?
Wow.
And is there anything we can do to manage it?
That's a question a lot of people are asking.
Yeah. What happens if we just keep growing without considering the long-term impacts?
The consequences can be pretty far-reaching,
Like what?
impacting everything from climate change
Yeah.
and loss of biodiversity to social unrest and political instability.
That's a lot.
It's not all doom and gloom, though.
Okay, good.
There are things we can do.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
What are some strategies for dealing with the challenges of a growing population?
One of the most effective approaches is investing in family planning and reproductive health services.
Okay.
Giving people control over their reproductive choices empowers them to make decisions that are right for them and their families.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What else is being done to address these challenges?
Education is another powerful tool,
Okay.
especially for girls and women.
Right.
When women have access to education, they tend to have fewer children and more opportunities to participate in society.
So it's a win-win situation.
Exactly.
So it's about more than just limiting population growth.
Right.
It's about creating a world where everyone has the chance to thrive.
I agree with that.
What about people who argue that trying to manage population growth is interfering with individual rights?
That's an important point, and it's crucial that we approach this topic with respect for human rights.
Okay.
Coercive measures are not only unethical, but often ineffective in the long run. Instead, it's about empowering people with knowledge, choices, and opportunities.
It's about working together to create a more sustainable and equitable future.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, though, you mentioned the carrying capacity of our planet.
Yes.
We've mostly been talking about that in terms of food and resources.
Right.
What about the waste we produce? Is there a limit to how much the Earth can handle?
That's a really interesting question, and one that more and more people are starting to think about. You're right, the Earth doesn't have an infinite capacity to absorb our waste.
Right.
We're seeing the consequences of exceeding those limits in things like climate change,
Oh, wow.
pollution, and the buildup of plastic in our oceans.
That's a lot to think about.
It's like we've been throwing this never-ending party on the planet, but haven't really thought about cleaning up the mess afterward.
So how do we even, wrap our heads around this idea of carrying capacity
Right.
when it comes to waste?
Yeah.
It's not as simple as saying, okay, this many people can fit on Earth.
Right.
We need to factor in how much we're consuming and the waste we're generating.
Absolutely. That's where the concept of ecological footprint comes in.
Okay, I've heard of that.
It's a way of measuring the impact of human activities on the planet,
Okay.
taking into account not just population size,
Right.
but also consumption patterns and waste generation.
So someone living like a high consumption lifestyle in a developed country
Yeah.
might have a much bigger footprint
Huge footprint.
than someone living a more traditional lifestyle in a developing country,
Exactly.
even though they're just one person.
It's not just about the number of people.
Right.
It's about their impact.
And that brings up those important questions about global equity and sustainability.
Absolutely.
How do we ensure that everyone has the opportunity to live a decent life
Right.
while also reducing our collective impact on the planet?
That is the million-dollar question.
It sounds like a real balancing act.
It is a balancing act.
It's not just about reducing consumption.
Right.
It's about consuming smarter
Yeah.
and making sure everyone has access to the resources they need to live a good life.
I think that's a really important point.
We've talked a lot about the challenges of population growth
Yeah.
and its impact on the environment.
We have.
But I want to end on a slightly more optimistic note.
Okay.
Is there anything we can do to actually increase the carrying capacity of the planet in a way that benefits both humans and the environment?
That's a great question, and one that a lot of brilliant minds are working on.
Yeah.
Through innovation and sustainable practices, we might be able to find ways to increase the Earth's capacity to support life.
Give me an example.
Imagine developing new technologies that allow us to produce more food,
Mm-hmm.
but with less land and water usage,
Okay.
or finding ways to harness renewable energy sources more efficiently.
So it's not just about limiting our impact. It's about finding creative solutions that allow us to thrive
Exactly.
without depleting the planet's resources.
It's about working with nature,
Yeah.
not against it,
Right.
to create a future where both human populations and natural ecosystems can flourish.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the world of population dynamics.
It has.
We've explored the factors that drive population growth and decline,
Yeah.
the concept of carrying capacity,
Mm-hmm.
and the complex interplay between human populations and the environment.
For sure.
It's clear that we face some significant challenges,
Definitely.
but there's also hope.
There is.
By understanding these complex systems and making conscious choices,
I agree.
we can work towards a more sustainable and equitable future for all.
I think that's a great message to end on.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. And remember, the future is in our hands. It's like we've been throwing a never-ending party on this planet,
Yeah.
but haven't really thought about cleaning up the mess afterwards.
It's a good analogy.
So how do we even wrap our heads around this idea of carrying capacity when it comes to waste?
Right.
It's not as simple as saying, okay, this many people can fit on Earth, right?
Right.
We need to factor in how much we're consuming and the waste we're generating.
Absolutely. That's where the concept of ecological footprint comes in.
Okay.
It's a way of measuring the impact of human activities on the planet,
Okay.
taking into account not just population size, but also consumption patterns and waste generation.
So someone living a high consumption lifestyle in a developed country might have a much bigger ecological footprint than someone
Absolutely.
living a more traditional lifestyle in a developing country.
Yeah, and that brings up important questions about global equity and sustainability.
Right.
How do we ensure that everyone has the opportunity to live a decent life while also reducing our collective impact on the planet?
It sounds like a real balancing act.
It is.
It's not just about reducing consumption. It's about consuming smarter and making sure that everyone has access to the resources they need
I agree.
to live a good life.
It's about shifting our mindset from a purely human-centered view of the world to one that recognizes the interconnectedness of human and natural systems.
We've talked a lot about the challenges of population growth and its impact on the environment.
Yeah.
But I want to end on a slightly more optimistic note.
Okay.
Is there anything we can do to actually increase the carrying capacity of the planet in a way that benefits both humans and the environment?
That's a great question, and one that a lot of brilliant minds are working on.
Well,
Through innovation and sustainable practices, we might be able to find ways to increase the Earth's capacity to support life.
like what?
Right.
What could we do?
Imagine developing new technologies that allow us to produce more food with less land and water usage, or finding ways to harness renewable energy sources more efficiently.
So it's not just about limiting our impact. It's about finding creative solutions that allow us to thrive without depleting the planet's resources.
Precisely, it's about working with nature, not against it, to create a future where both human populations and natural ecosystems can flourish.
This has been a really fascinating look into the world of population dynamics.
It has been.
We've seen how populations grow, shrink, and adapt to their surroundings.
A lot of moving parts.
But here's something to think about: what happens in a rapidly changing world like ours. How will populations, including our own, need to adapt? It's a lot to consider, and thanks for helping us break it all down.
It was my pleasure.